You're listening to a podcast by Way Collective, a contemplative community for love and liberation in Santa Barbara, California. This recording was the conversation starter at our downtown dinner and dialogue on April 23rd, 2025. Thanks for tuning in. So tonight, on the heels of Resurrection Sunday and its emphasis on transformation, I thought it'd be nice to get together and talk about something we all go through, whether we ask for it or not: change. But I want to reflect a bit together tonight, not only on change itself, but how we move through it and how we can find peace, not in spite of life's changes, but within them, or maybe even because of them. And so I want to begin by offering up this thought. Peace isn't found by escaping change. Peace is found by learning how to be at home within it. George Harrison had this album in the early 70s called All Things Must Pass. And I think we all know deep down on some level that everything passes. Both joy and heartbreak, the stuckness, the sudden clarity, the quiet awe, the restless anxiety. They come and go, don't they? So what do we do with that? Well, I've come to believe that in the face of that constant movement, one of the most courageous things that we can do is learn to love our unfolding lives, to show up open-hearted for the life that we have, not the one we wish we had. Most of us have likely given into the illusion of control at some time or another. But if we're being real, when we go through something difficult, like a global pandemic or a breakup, or perhaps a surprise diagnosis or a job loss, we learn very quickly that we do not actually control much of anything. And what we often want most is to get out, right? To fix it, to make it stop. And that's just part of being human. You know, it's good, necessary, and even sacred to end unnecessary suffering. I mean, we have to be about justice. But sometimes we can't fix things in our lives right away, even though we would like to. Sometimes we're asked to walk through a long hallway without knowing where the exit door is. You know what I mean? And when that happens, we each face a choice. We can either resist the flow or learn how to move with it. You know, my favorite professor out in Claremont, Roland Faber, said that we all seek salvation in what he calls arrested states, which are these moments of peace or joy or insight that feel like they transcend the world. And when we taste these moments, we want to go back. We want to recreate the magic and relive the peace again. But here's the catch. We actually can't. No moment, no matter how beautiful, can actually be held forever. We can't freeze the river, and life is much more like a river, and no one steps in the same river twice. Maybe you've had one of these mountaintop experiences during a retreat or a conference, you know, the kind that bring tears and clarity and connection. They can be real and sacred, can't they? But here's what can happen if we're not careful. Afterward, we can spend years trying to get back to that moment instead of noticing the beauty still unfolding right in front of us. Because the reality is, we can't actually force them to occur again, though we might try. Have you ever known someone who just talks about the good old days? You know, someone who had one of these moments of sheer awe and joy, and then they spend the rest of their lives trying to get back there, trying to recreate the situation where they experienced the peace, and yet they find themselves unable to enter back in. You know, Richard Rohr says that our last experience of God, and you can read love or joy or peace there, is the biggest obstacle to the next experience of God or love or joy or peace. Why is that? Perhaps it's because what is actually needed is not a spirituality that looks backwards, but instead a spirituality of flow. And this is where Faber has this idea that he calls the peace of passage. And I'll say that in the wake of my own experience of suffering, this idea really opened up something in me that I didn't know was there. So on this topic, he writes, "The peace of passage is not the peace of arriving. It's the grace of becoming, of finding rest while still moving, and of allowing life's transitions to be the very space where spirit dwells. And that moves me every time I hear it. I say, remember there's grace and beauty in the becoming each week in my blessing for a reason, right? It means that peace isn't about stillness. It's not about achieving a state and locking it in. Have you ever heard it sold to you that way before? Like if you could just get your contemplative or your meditation practice right, then you'd never need to change anything or go anywhere else because you would just be infinitely tuned into peace, But in this idea of a spirituality of flow, peace is actually participation. Peace is presence. And peace is trusting the movement itself. Over the course of our lives, we have to learn to be gentle with our becomings. We've all been through unexpected seasons of struggle or pain or fear or frustration. I remember when my therapist said to me once, when you're going through seasons of chaos like that, you've got to slow down. We have to take it day by day or hour by hour, or sometimes even, I think, breath by breath. And you know what happens when we can learn to cultivate presence in those tough seasons? I think little by little, we realize that life will continue to carry us through, even when we're not sure where we're going. And all we have to do is walk with it step by step. Life is this kind of flow, but it needs to be said that it is a loving flow. It reminds me of that old verse from Colossians that says, "Clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony." And harmony isn't still, it's a relationship, it's a rhythm, it's a song that's in motion. And if we can begin to see our own lives as part of that music, if we can trust that love is always composing new notes, then we can stop resisting change as an enemy, and we can welcome it instead as a sacred companion. Trusting that life is a cycle of love is central to understanding how transformation works at a deeper spiritual level. Because life is not a series of isolated events or static states, but rather it's a continual and dynamic cycle of renewal, like we talked about in the Easter meditation last week. This cycle isn't merely about change for change's sake. It's the movement of love that flows through every moment, bringing both endings and beginnings. So in times of grief, loss, or hardship, we often focus on the passing or the perishing of things. But within that passing is always the invitation to love again, to renew ourselves in ways that are beyond our own understanding. So every cycle of loss births the possibility for new creation, just as every moment of beauty holds the potential for deeper surrender. This cycle of love reminds us that transformation doesn't erase the past or its struggles, but rather integrates them into a larger, ever-expanding flow of life. It's love, not as an abstract concept, but as a living, breathing force that binds together our experiences and shapes us into who we are becoming. This cycle is the essence of our transformation, and each turn can bring us closer to the wholeness we're meant to embody, one step at a time, if we let it. I know that many of us have felt that in the wake of certain forms of Christianity, our spiritual paths have been meandering at best, right? And sometimes when we get tossed around in the wake of feeling lost, if we're not careful, we can lose this truth, that not all who wander are lost, and especially that every twist and turn that we've taken has brought us to this moment, and this moment is the moment of transformation. No matter where your journey has taken you, no matter where you're at on your life path tonight, the invitation is the same: to find courage in the flow. So, what if peace isn't what we thought? Maybe it's not about being untouched by change, but about learning to be at home within it. Maybe peace is what happens when we open our hands to the unknown and say, yes, even now, I will trust this unfolding life. Because here's the secret. Life is always flowing forward. And that movement, even when it feels like loss, is yet another form that love has taken as it carries us into something new. That's the piece of passage. That's the heart of transformation. And it can be ours if we're willing to walk with it. You know, it's my conviction that the essence of personal transformation lies in learning to flow with the current of life rather than resisting it. And transformation is not about forcing change to happen, nor about reaching a final state of perfection in any way. It's about the gradual, ongoing process of becoming. Just as a river continually shifts its path, we too are always in motion, evolving and growing and adapting. And true transformation happens when we can become comfortable with this constant state of flux, embracing both the joy and the discomfort that come with it. It's in this acceptance of change and in the trust that each moment is a part of a larger unfolding that we can find peace. Rather than clinging to the past or trying to control the future, we must instead allow ourselves to be present to what is, knowing that both tragedy and beauty are part of the same journey. And this mindset shift from resistance to acceptance is what opens us up to the deeper layers of transformation. It's not about reaching an end point, but about learning to live in the flow, understanding that who we are becoming is as sacred as who we once were. So personal transformation is the practice of being at peace with this ongoing becoming. And in that peace, we discover our truest selves. And this peace isn't something we arrive at once and for all. It's something we carry as we walk, not in control, but in presence. So, if you're carrying something tonight, perhaps an anxiety or confusion or longing or just the ache of being human, what if we didn't try to fix it right away? What if we were on a journey of just letting ourselves be here with it? What if we could trust that our lives, even now, are carrying us into something new? And what if the deepest kind of peace comes not when we finally get it all right, but when we stop resisting the river and let ourselves float along with it? All right, I'm excited to talk about this tonight. Thanks for listening to this podcast by Way Collective. To keep up with our community, you can subscribe to this podcast, go to www.waycollective.org, or follow us on Instagram at @waycollective. Peace and every good, y'all.